In the grand drawing rooms of Victorian England, the shimmer of silk gowns and the delicate scent of powders told a story of elegance, wealth, and social standing. But behind the corseted waists and the pale powdered cheeks lay a truth that was far from beautiful. Fashion during the Victorian era was not just about beauty. It was about danger, sacrifice, and in some cases, death. The desire to look perfect in a society obsessed with appearances came at a cost, and many paid with their lives. It was an age defined by contrast, refinement and repression, opulence and suffering. And nowhere was this contradiction more apparent than in the very clothes and cosmetics people wore. The Victorian pursuit of beauty was relentless. Women were expected to look fragile and angelic, their skin pale, their waists impossibly small, their dresses voluminous and perfectly constructed. But few realized that to achieve this ideal, they were slowly poisoning themselves. Sometimes literally. One of the most haunting examples of this silent suffering lay in the very fabric they wore, literally. In the mid-1800s, a new dye known as Sheely's green took the fashion world by storm. It was vibrant, dazzling, and the perfect hue to set off the muted grays and browns of Victorian interiors and wardrobes. Dresses, wallpapers, hats, artificial flowers, all were suddenly painted in this glowing green. But Sheely's green contained a dangerous secret: arsenic. The women who wore these dresses didn't know that with every step, every flutter of the fabric, microscopic particles of arsenic dust were released into the air. These were breathed in, absorbed through the skin, and slowly poisoned the wearer. Some seamstresses reported sores, ulcers, and skin irritation from simply handling the fabric. But it wasn't only the wearers who suffered, it was everyone around them. Even guests at a party could fall ill just by standing near someone in an arsenic-dyed gown. In one tragic case, a young girl in England died after prolonged exposure to her green dress. Her skin had turned greenish, her body weakened, and her death was slow and mysterious, until scientists uncovered the horrifying truth. These fashionable colors were a silent killer, but the danger didn't stop at dresses. Corsets, an essential part of Victorian fashion, also played a deadly role. Made from tightly pulled fabrics and stiffened with whalebone or steel, corsets were worn daily to achieve that prized hourglass figure. For women, this was not optional. A proper lady needed to have a waist as small as possible, often under 18 inches. Women started wearing corsets in childhood, and over time, their bodies were molded by the constriction. Internal organs were pushed aside. Ribs became deformed. Breathing became shallow. Digestion was impaired, and fainting spells were common. It was fashionable for women to carry fainting couches in their homes, not just as a decoration, but out of necessity. They literally could not breathe. Some women wore corsets so tight they developed permanent damage. There are medical records from the time describing corset liver, where the organ had been compressed and reshaped by years of pressure. And yet, despite the health risks, the corset remained an unchallenged symbol of femininity. To remove it was to remove one's place in society. Beyond clothing, the Victorian era's obsession with pale skin led to the widespread use of toxic cosmetics. The paler a woman was, the more refined and wealthy she appeared. After all, only laborers tanned in the sun. So women dusted their faces with powders made from lead and mercury. These heavy metals slowly absorbed through the skin, damaging the nervous system, leading to hair loss, fatigue, tremors, and eventually madness. Lip colors were often made from cinnabar, a bright red pigment that also contained mercury. Rouges for cheeks were brewed from toxic carmine, and eye drops to brighten the eyes were laced with belladonna, a deadly plant that dilated pupils but could also cause blindness over time. All in the name of beauty. It wasn't just women who suffered. Men, too, were drawn into the dangerous world of fashion. Hair dyes containing lead were popular among older gentlemen who wanted to hide their graying hair. These dyes were slow-working poisons, gradually affecting the brain. Top hats, symbols of status, were made with mercury-treated felt, leading to tremors and psychological symptoms. It's no coincidence that the phrase "mad as a hatter" comes from this very practice. Perfumes and fragrances, while elegant in scent, were often mixed with substances like benzene or formaldehyde, especially in lower-quality versions. Prolonged Use could cause respiratory problems or skin disorders. These scents weren't just romantic. They could be lethal. Even the very air one breathed indoors could be dangerous. Wallpaper laced with arsenic dyes released invisible toxins into parlors and bedrooms. One study from the late 19th century showed that a significant number of upper-class homes had dangerously high levels of arsenic in their walls. Guests and residents would fall ill and never understand why. The more beautiful and luxurious the room, the more poisonous it could be. Shoes, too, were part of this deadly ensemble. Ladies' shoes were often made with dyes and glues that contained harmful chemicals. Fashionable pointed toes and high heels caused foot deformities. There were reports of women developing infections from tiny cuts that turned gangrenous. But shoes had to be tight, elegant, and matching the outfit. Pain and danger were secondary. Wigs and hairpieces were another fashion trend hiding a disturbing truth. Many were made from real hair, often harvested from the dead or stolen from the poor. These hairpieces were treated with chemicals to preserve them and styled using hot irons, waxes, and flammable sprays. Accidental fires during formal dinners and balls were shockingly common. Women's hair could catch fire from the gas lamps and candles that lit the grand halls of the time. Tragedy was just a gust of air away. Perhaps one of the most tragic parts of this story is how little agency many women had over these choices. They weren't wearing these deadly fashions purely for pleasure. They were expected to. Society demanded it. To appear plain or natural was considered shameful. A woman's reputation, marriage prospects, and even family honor were tied to her appearance. To refuse fashion was to refuse one's role in society. That in factories and workshops, the situation was even more harrowing. Young girls and women worked long hours creating these beautiful clothes and accessories. They handled toxic dyes with bare hands. They inhaled fibers and powders day in and day out. There are accounts of girls fainting on the factory floor, coughing up blood, or collapsing from exhaustion, all for a few pennies a day. Their suffering was invisible to the wealthy ladies who wore the garments. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of all was how long the truth remained hidden, or worse, ignored. By the late 1800s, scientists had already linked arsenic-laced dyes to severe health issues. Doctors warned of the effects of lead and mercury in cosmetics. Journalists wrote exposés on the dangers of tight lacing and factory conditions. But change came slowly. Vanity and profit were powerful forces. The fashion industry, even then, thrived on illusions. Some women, aware of the dangers, tried to push back. Health reform movements encouraged women to abandon corsets and embrace looser, natural clothing. But these women were mocked, labeled as radicals or hysterics. The desire to be accepted, admired, or loved often outweighed the desire to live safely. And so the deadly dance of fashion continued by the end of the Victorian era. As medical science advanced and society began to shift, these dark secrets were finally brought into the light. Regulations were introduced. Safer dyes replaced arsenic. Lead and mercury were banned from cosmetics. Corsets slowly fell out of favor. But the damage had already been done. Countless women and men had suffered silently in the name of beauty, and, though time has passed, the echoes of Victorian fashion's deadly grip still linger. Modern industries still grapple with the same balance between beauty and harm, image and truth. The story of poisoned petticoats and lethal lipsticks is not just a history lesson. It is a reminder. A reminder that what glitters is not always safe. That fashion, when taken to extremes, can cost far more than money. The tale of Victorian fashion's dark underbelly doesn't end with corsets and arsenic green gowns. Beneath every fashionable choice was a quiet system of suffering, a shadow network of labor, pain, and silence. And in many ways, the deeper one peers, the more horrifying the picture becomes. While the upper classes flaunted elegance at the grand balls and garden parties, the lower classes toiled in silence to feed the beast of vanity. Children, some as young as 5, worked in dye factories, inhaling deadly fumes and handling lethal chemicals without any protection. Their small, nimble fingers were perfect for intricate lacework or threading artificial flowers. But this dexterity came at a brutal cost: chemical burns, lung disease, and even blindness were common in these hidden workshops. To eye in the candlelit rooms where women curled their hair for social occasions, the products used to style and set curls often contained waxes and oils laced with harmful additives. Hair was not just fashion, it was status. Elaborate styles that took hours to create were sprayed with early forms of fixatives that were highly flammable. One wrong move near a candle or a gas lamp, and an evening of beauty could turn into a night of tragedy. Reports circulated of women whose hair caught fire mid-ball, leaving them disfigured, or worse. Then came the matter of the beauty creams and skin lighteners that claimed to restore youth, smooth skin, and bring a glowing complexion. These creams were aggressively marketed in women's magazines of the time, promising results that would help any woman win a man's heart or climb the social ladder. But their main ingredients? White lead, carbolic acid, and mercury. Women who used these creams over time noticed changes they couldn't explain: thinning hair, drooping skin, tremors, darkened gums, even hallucinations. And yet, instead of blaming the products, they often believed something was wrong with them. After all, the packaging looked elegant, the advertisements featured smiling, flawless women, and the products were endorsed by experts. Who would suspect that beauty itself was the killer? Even Victorian morning fashion had its deadly secrets. After the death of a loved one, it was tradition, especially for women, to wear all black for a long period of time. But black dye, especially when used on heavy crepe fabrics, was particularly dangerous. The dyes used to achieve deep blacks were among the most toxic in the industry, often containing aniline compounds that could cause nausea, respiratory issues, and skin irritation. Morning dresses were heavy, suffocating, and painful to wear for extended periods. And yet, social expectation demanded that widows endure this for years, sometimes the rest of their lives. In a tragic twist, the garments worn to mourn the dead often hastened the wearer's own demise. Hats, a mandatory part of fashion for both genders, also carried hidden threats. Women's hats were often adorned with feathers, stuffed birds, or elaborate silk flowers. These were not just decorative, they were a form of competitive display. Women were expected to wear something unique, something that stood out. This demand led to the widespread slaughter of exotic birds across the world, especially in colonies under British rule. The egret, in particular, was hunted to near extinction for its feathers. The men's top hats, as noted earlier, were made with felt treated using mercury nitrate. Hatters, those who made and shaped the hats, suffered terribly. They developed tremors, speech problems, and emotional instability, symptoms now associated with mercury poisoning. These men worked long hours in enclosed spaces filled with vaporized mercury. Madness wasn't a metaphor, it was their fate. Underwear, a subject rarely spoken of in polite society, was another area of hidden hazard. Women wore multiple layers, chemises, bloomers, drawers, often made of unbreathable materials and dyed with toxic compounds. Combined with poor ventilation and the inability to properly wash these garments regularly, infections were widespread. Though rarely spoken of, Victorian women suffered in silence, believing discomfort and illness were the price of femininity. And then, there was the issue of artificial beauty aids, false teeth, glass eyes, and early forms of prosthetics that attempted to maintain appearances. Many of these were made with materials like vulcanized rubber or early plastics that emitted harmful fumes or contained dangerous stabilizers. False teeth sometimes used lead-based fixatives. Smiling could literally introduce poison into the bloodstream. In some elite circles, beauty treatments went even further into the bizarre. Some women reportedly applied small doses of arsenic to their skin intentionally, believing it would keep them pale and smooth. Arsenic-laced wafers were sold in shops, advertised as a beauty enhancer. These pills were slow killers, damaging the liver and kidneys, causing hair loss, and weakening the heart. The obsession with a delicate, almost ghost-like beauty drove women to extremes. Some practiced tight lacing to such a degree that their internal organs shifted permanently. Upon death, autopsies revealed livers that were unnaturally misshapen and lungs compressed into half their normal size. But in life, those women were admired for their dainty waists and graceful figures. Even jewelry had its dangers. Popular pieces were made using radium, uranium glass, or contained traces of lead or cadmium. Some lockets and brooches glowed faintly in the dark, a novelty at the time, later recognized as a radiation hazard. Those who wore them too often suffered rashes, burns, or worse. But it was beautiful, and that was all that mattered. As newspapers began to pick up on these stories of poisoned gowns, insane hatters, fainting ladies, and mysterious deaths in fashionable homes, public awareness slowly began to shift. The horror could no longer be dismissed as mere coincidence. Doctors, too, began to publish papers linking various illnesses to the chemicals found in common clothing and cosmetics. Reformers emerged, writers, scientists, and brave women who demanded transparency and safety. Campaigns were launched against the use of arsenic in dyes and lead in face powders. Factories that produced toxic materials came under scrutiny, and legislation slowly followed. But even then, many industries fought back, claiming their products were perfectly safe. Profits, as always, resisted progress. Despite these efforts, some dangerous practices persisted well into the early 20th century. The ghost of Victorian fashion's deadly past clung to the next generations. The allure of beauty continued to overpower the warnings of doctors and reformers. Women still felt the pressure to conform, to be seen, to be admired, no matter the cost. The tragedy of this era is not just that so many suffered, but that they suffered in silence. Victorian society trained women to be demure, obedient, and quiet about their discomfort. To complain about a corset, a rash, or a recurring fainting spell was considered unladylike. Many accepted their pain as part of their duty. Mothers taught daughters how to endure it. And so, the cycle continued. Looking back, it's easy to wonder, how? Could they not see the danger? How could entire generations ignore such obvious harm? But the real question may be more uncomfortable. How much has truly changed? Even today, people still wear painful shoes, use chemicals on their skin, alter their bodies, and chase impossible beauty standards in the name of acceptance. Toxic ingredients may be banned, but harmful trends evolve. The deadly corset may be gone, but other forms of physical pressure, cosmetic surgery, extreme diets, waist trainers, have taken its place. In understanding the horrors of Victorian fashion, we aren't just uncovering a historical curiosity, we are holding up a mirror that reflects the timeless human desire to belong, to be loved, to be beautiful, even at great cost. It reminds us that beauty, when demanded by society rather than chosen freely, can become a weapon, a silent killer dressed in velvet and lace. The rustling of silk gowns, the clinking of hatpins, the scent of powdered arsenic. They may be ghosts of the past, but their message is hauntingly present. Behind every fashion trend lies a question: who suffers for this beauty? Who pays the hidden price? Let the story of poisoned beauty in the Victorian era serve as a reminder that elegance without ethics, fashion without care, and beauty without safety is not progress. It's a trap, one that generations of women, men, and children fell into with eyes wide shut, chasing the shimmer of something that was always meant to fade. The next time you see a photograph of a Victorian lady, flawless in her hourglass dress, pale and perfect, remember, she may have looked like a porcelain doll, but she was made of flesh and bone. And the beauty that framed her was not just stitched in silk, but soaked in suffering.